Hi everyone, and welcome to another monthly reads. So, what did I read in May? Well, I read the brand new Susanna Clarke novel, Piranesi, which came out last September, and I read the Earthsea, the first 4 books, which was formerly published under the Earthsea Quartet. So, let's get started. Okay, so Piranesi, what did I think of it? Well, I really enjoyed it. I'll have to give you just a brief synopsis because if I give too much away, then it just spoils the story. The one thing I enjoyed most about this is not knowing what was going to happen next. Like, every twist and turn and every page was a surprise because I just had no idea where it was going, and I just really enjoyed that. But so, anyway. So Piranesi lives in this house is his world, and he has no concept of anything else. The only other person he talks to is the other, as that's the only other human being that he knows exists. And he spends his days wandering around this big house, just cataloguing and journaling what he's up to and the things that he finds and sees. Because there's things like animals and like birds especially that he sees. And there's a couple of unusual things about the house that he sort of spends time looking after those things. And yeah, basically the other tells him that there's somebody else in the house, and that's really the mystery. So the whole story is told from Piranesi's perspective. It's him keeping his journal of what's happening, and it really makes it quite interesting because he is an unreliable narrator, but he knows he's unreliable. It's sort of like, I'm only going to talk about what I like, and that's what's important to me, and so that's what's going in my journal. And I'm sorry to anybody who reads this and they don't understand, because this is what I like. And that's the way he is. And it means that the story moves at quite a nice pace because we're just finding out what's interesting, not sort of all the boring day-to-day things. It can be quite sort of weird at the beginning, I found, because it sort of plods in an odd way, but you kind of know there's a point to this because it's all world building, and it's that world building that keeps you drawn in until the actual story starts. I definitely felt like from the way Piranesi wrote about different things, I got an opinion on them, even though I wasn't sure why I had that opinion. And then it was nice to see that Piranesi addressed this himself later on and was just like, oh, I formed that opinion of it, and that was an assumption, and I shouldn't have made that assumption, or, oh, I was right to make that assumption. And it was quite nice to have a novel where you feel like the reader and the main character are sort of kind of in the same position. You just trust what's happening, even though you don't really know. And that was a really nice touch to the novel. That is a big thing, you know. Piranesi trusts the house. He trusts the place he lives in. He feels that everything will go as it's supposed to go, or at least it will go how the house wants, and he just kind of has to accept that. And so he kind of, although he's an active part of the story, he kind of feels like he's being just dragged along at some points. It's quite a short book, but there is actually a special edition with an additional chapter in it. But I'm not quite sure whether it actually needed any more. It ended in quite a nice place. It was open-ended, but I felt satisfied with the ending because I felt like, you know, the characters were satisfied with where it ended. And I feel like that's quite an important thing, you know. If you feel like the characters have come to their natural conclusion at where they should be, then you feel like the natural conclusion is okay, even though it's an open-ended one. I would definitely recommend this book to, you know, everybody. It's amazing. It really is. It's such a short, quick, really fun read. And a little kind of spoiler, if you're interested in things that are like during the 70s when there was a lot of interest in like the occult and things like psychic questing, there's a little bit of a link to all that kind of thing in here. So if you are definitely interested in that kind of thing, then I would definitely suggest reading this book, as you will definitely get the hints of that that are in it. I won't say any more because that will be a really big spoiler and then that will kind of spoil it. But yeah, it's definitely a fun book to read with lots of twists and turns, and you will never guess what is going to happen next unless you do, and I just was not paying enough attention to figure it out. But yeah, it's really enjoyable. So the next book that I read in May was the Earthsea Quartet, as it's also known. And this is the first 4 books that are in the Earthsea series. If you're not familiar with it, then it is an amazing fantasy series. I have actually read most of the others, as I do have the collector's edition of all of them. But I just wanted to read something that was a small paperback today. So, if you're not familiar with Earthsea, then it is a fantasy series that mostly follows the character of Ged, who is also known as Sparrowhawk, because in this world they have 2 different names, a use name and a secret name. And he's a wizard, and it follows him from his very early youth all the way through his life, following the challenges that he faces, the things he learns, and how he becomes a very famous wizard that, you know, faces these world-changing dilemmas. And it's just, in terms of what it is, it's a very good fantasy series. You know, the stories aren't that complicated. It was originally designed for younger readers. But one of the things that Earthsea is very important for is the way it deals with ethnic minorities. Most of the characters in the Earthsea books are of other ethnicities. They aren't white. The only characters that are white are the Kargish people, and they aren't really a big focus of the story, apart from in the second book, which does focus on a Kargish priestess. But she lives a very solitary life, so it's really just her and a couple of other priestesses. And then she meets Ged, and he comes into the story. But most of it is spent in the main islands of Earthsea. So yeah, it's very good for representation. And there was a lot of criticism when the first 2 came out about the way it dealt with women, but over the years she addressed that throughout the other books. And then in Tanu, you have this very sort of interesting relationship between, you know, Tenar and Ged, and her coming to terms with being a much older woman and all sorts of other things. This most recent collector's edition has some wonderful illustrations in it that really highlight the diversity within Earthsea and also show the world more closer to what the author wanted it to be shown as. Another reason why I think Earthsea is such an important series of novels is because it was written by a female writer at a time when fantasy was dominated by men. What I liked about Earthsea was that because it was written for younger readers, all the stories are quite shorter than what you'd expect for a normal high fantasy series, but this made them, you know, really nice and enjoyable for just a quick read. I really enjoyed it. I do love the Earthsea books. They are quite good and fun. But they also are very serious, and they try to teach you something about the world, and I feel that that's important within fantasy novels, that they have to have some relation back to the real world, or else what's really the point in them? It makes you think about things like life and death and birth and, you know, your place in the greater equilibrium, as they call it. So yeah, Earthsea's a very good book. If you like dragons, there's dragons in it. Always good when there's dragons in a fantasy novel, love that. But yeah, I would recommend to a lot of people that they should really read Earthsea because it is a very important cornerstone of fantasy, and if you haven't ever read it, then please go and read it. It's so important. those were the books that I read the past month. If you've read them too, then please comment in the videos. It's always great to have a conversation about books. And as always, thank you so much. Please like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!